Mobile Suit Zeta Gundam. This is a series review that I sort of dread, but at the same time I'm pretty stoked to do. I think I dread it because I wonder if anyone's going to want to crucify me if I criticize this particular show, given how big its following is. But I'm still going to talk about it because I legitimately believe that it earns all the praise that it gets. So to ease us into this, I'm going to start with a story. Believe it or not, I hadn't seen Zeta Gundam or its sequel, Double Zeta, prior to the year 2020. The reason being is that my exposure to Gundam up until the mid-2000s to the late 2000s was almost purely from Toonami and Adult Swim when I was a younger guy. Over here in the US, I don't think Zeta Gundam was ever put on either of those programs, and Double Zeta was never even dubbed in English. So, one night during the pandemic when nobody had anything really that we could do, while I was watching 0083 Stardust Memory with my friend Xavier, he actually asked me if I had seen Zeta yet, and I told him no. Now, Xavier is one of those guys, much as I love him, that almost exclusively speaks in memes until you tell him to actually talk seriously for 5 seconds. If he comments on this video, it will likely be a Zeta meme. So after he finished all the memes about Camille being a man's name and Quattro totally not being Char and so on and so forth, he finally told me that he doesn't really want to give me too many details about Zeta Gundam before I go into it. I just need to understand that it might be Yoshiyuki Tomino's greatest series ever. So after the first episode, I got to see what the reference for all the memes were. After that episode, I got to understand why everybody said that this is one of the darkest and yet best mecha series ever created. Though I'll save where I hold the show in the ultimate hierarchy until the very end of the video, I have to say that I find myself constantly revisiting this particular series when I think of a really good example of how to do a grim, dark story properly. So, let's get started with the review and break down what exactly it is that makes this thing tick.
I came to laugh at you.
Now, I know some people are probably rolling their eyes when I talk about the term grimdark, because people probably think that it's an overused term given how popular Warhammer 40,000 has become over the last 10 years. Well, I use it because I think it's an easy term to use, admittedly, but I also think that I really feel like this is one of those examples that comes around whenever people talk about grim storytelling that's impactful. I do want to contextualize this review in regards to comparing it to the show that it's a sequel to in Mobile Suit Gundam. The original Gundam show is, for better or worse, following a group of young people forced into a war and seeing if they can survive it. The interesting thing about the original series is that you don't really encounter that many war crimes that the series has now become famous for. You also have a lot more levity than Zeta Gundam has. Now, in the original Gundam, you see how nasty war can be, with several named characters getting killed in rather sad and brutal fashion, but a lot of the genocide that you hear about within Gundam happened before the very first episode. And let us not forget that's all Zeon's fault. Anyway, Zeta Gundam, on the other hand, is a show that does not pull punches with any of this sort of thing. You see the immediate after effects, or close to it, of many scenarios, and you see them in action as well. You see the mentality of the people that want to commit these war crimes, and the absolutely insane casual nature in which they reference them. No joke, there's a character named Jared Mesa who, as a reflection of some people that I've heard of in the actual militaries of the world, is phenomenal at, failing upwards, so I guess he's the Hassan Piker of Gundam characters, actually talks about seeing people gassed almost like he's doing his taxes. So the Hassan Piker of Gundam characters. "Oh, Jared Mesa! I'm going to toss you off from a mountain!" In the ring, you mean? "No, the Kilimanjaro Titans base! In real life!" Then, of course, we have the episode where the AUG members find out exactly what happened at Side 1. I will let the imagery speak for itself. I'm somebody who really enjoys grim storytelling. My two favorite manga of all time are Devilman and Berserk. Many of my favorite films of all time are war movies or gangster films, none of which are known for their bright and happy tone. Some of my favorite video games of all time have a really dark tone to them, so on and so forth. I don't know why, but there's just something really special about a good, dark story. And I think that there's something special about those that aim to keep it bittersweet. I have a whole theory about light shining in a darker area being that much brighter, but that's just my personal theory. If there is a word that I could use to describe Zeta Gundam, it would be sobering. If you're the type of anime viewer that looks to see a happy, fun time whenever you're watching these cartoon characters do whatever they're doing, you're going to be in for a rough ride here. The amount of death and destruction, on top of the absolute personal nature of it all, makes for a show that honestly is whipping you constantly. You better be ready for the pain, and you better be the type of person that's kind of a masochist going into this. Now, it's not to say that the grimdark elements are all that persist here. This is Mobile Suit Gundam, and the enjoyable action that is in almost every single Gundam series is present here as well. So is the great characterization, but we'll talk about that later. I really want to talk about why this is supposed to be what Grimm stories are, in my opinion. The one commonality between a lot of the best Grimm stories have specific elements to their world. Each one comes across as an amoral, violent, and sometimes dystopian setting. Though Zeta Gundam isn't necessarily the third one, not really in my opinion. The second and first very much apply. Zeta's setting feels a lot more amoral than the original Gundam did, considering the cynicism scale gets dialed up to 11. From the get-go, you see the lead character, Camille Bidon, lives in a home where his father is a massive pile of shit, who treats his son like crap and cheats on his wife pretty much openly. The home colony that Camille lives at is a Titan's base, and as you see from the get-go, this new wing of the Federation military treats people like absolute garbage, and they act like a bunch of high school bullies that were given absolute power by a corrupt government. When you get introduced to the protagonist faction in this show, the AUG, you do find some good guys. At the same time, you also see that some characters within the show aren't really in a mental place where they can do the right thing like they absolutely should, or some are just completely obsessed with winning. Looking at you, Wong. The deuteragonist of this show is an old friend in Char Aznable, now going by the alias Quattro Vagina, which yes does mean 4 vaginas, and is the mentor of Camille Bidon. It goes without saying that Camille and Char are quite a pair. Camille is a naive, impulsive brat that honestly needs a massive dose of reality and a massive ass-kicking anytime that the little shit gets out of line. And whoo boy does he get his ass kicked.
Violence is no answer!
As for Char, he's got his own issues I'll get to in a second, but ultimately, he's still got massive character flaws that cloud his judgment and ultimately make it seem like the tiger won't be able to change his stripes as much as he tries. Zeta Gundam really has this the world is shit and will remain shit despite our best efforts sort of vibe to it. There's some definite good guys with Amuro and Captain Bright returning, plus the addition of characters like Emma Sheen, who is the best character in this show and I will hear no statements otherwise, Blex Forer, Henkin Beckener, Apolly, Roberto, and Astanage. Even so, the Titans themselves honestly feel more like a foe that just will not let up. Almost like a Hydra where you take off one head, 2 more pop up, and somehow they got even better mobile suits this time. As it stands, it's the oppressive, pull-no-punches attitude that really serves the show well. One common theme with Tomino's work is his desire to show the audience war through a child's eyes. And during the entire process of what's going on, we see Camille Bidon do exactly that, and have to learn some very painful lessons in the meantime. And man, it's a hell of a ride. I think to sum up this section in regards to what makes Zeta Gundam such a great exercise in grim storytelling is both its lack of willingness to take the pressure off of the viewer, but also its lack of willingness to pull its punches on what war does to people, and how it can twist individuals and entire governments into a shadow of what they used to be. Now, just as a side note, I feel like this is a great example of a quote-unquote political show in fiction. Now, we put big air quotes around political and shirt dudes putting it on the screen every time I say that for a reason. Now, what most people, when they say Gundam is political, and they use that to try to badger you over the internet, they're the type of person that thinks the Donald Trump appearance on Family Guy was biting in clever satire. That's not what I mean here. Tomino basically grew up in a Japan recovering from World War II, so it's obvious where his feelings are on war and its pointlessness come from. The one thing I always appreciate about Tomino is that his shows were anti-war, but they weren't the type of anti-war story where everyone's a fucking caricature. This is somebody, as a writer, that I respect a lot because he can tell an anti-war story, but it's not an anti-soldier story. He shows both sides of soldiers. Some that are not good people, but some that are amazing people. And a lot of them are complicated. There's definitely some puppy-kickingly evil dudes in this show, but there's just as much, if not more, fleshed out characters that reflect the type of story that Tomino tries to tell. It's the sort of lesson that creators like Hideo Kojima, creator of the Metal Gear Solid franchise, who's a massive Gundam fan, Hideaki Anno, who created Evangelion, and Shuko Murase, who created Ergo Proxy and then later directed Gundam Hathaway, took to heart as both fans of Tomino's work, at least in Kojima's case, and for both Anno and Murase, people who learned from Tomino directly working with him on certain projects. If you want to get a point across in a story that's critical of an element of existence that we would deem political, make sure that it's something that can be taken in at any point in time. Whether you told the story 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, or you tell it 50 years from now. So that way, it can always be understood, and the moral of the story seems timeless. The best quote-unquote political stories can be enjoyed outside of the times that they were created in. You know, the opposite of the absolute fucking dreck that Marvel and DC have been putting out for the last decade. Now, second thing we're going to talk about, why is it that Zeta Gundam does Gundam so well? Since I mentioned Warhammer 40k earlier, I feel I need to share a similar sentiment to my friends who love the 40k universe every time a piece of Gundam media comes out. Warhammer 40k fans wonder, anytime there's going to be 40k media, is this going to do Warhammer right? Now, I always wonder, with Gundam stuff, is this going to do Gundam right? For me, I envy the Warhammer fans, which is why I joined the ranks as a proud stan of the Sons of Vulcan, the Salamanders. But anyway, since 2017, 40k fans have received stuff like Dark Tide, Rogue Trader, Space Marine 2, and a plethora of fun books, which I recommend the Carcharodons books by Robbie McNiven. Now, since that time as a Gundam fan, I got Iron-Blooded Orphans, which concluded in 2017. I got Gundam Hathaway, and both of those are great! Fit Gundam like a glove. Then I got shitty Engineer Hogwarts with G-Witch. And then I got shitty NTR Psychics with Seed Freedom. It's the Gundam equivalent to being Charlie Brown at Halloween.
I got a quarter. I got a rock.
Seriously though, G-Quack better be fucking good. But what does it mean to get Gundam? Well, the key thing when it comes to Gundam is that there needs to be some kind of war. There needs to be some strong characterization, and there needs to be really cool looking robots. Before someone tries to throw G-Gundam at me, at least in regards to the war part, shut the fuck up. Part of the story is that the Gundam fight is literally called the Perfect War. And when Master Asia goes through the Gundam fight and wins it, when he actually won the contest prior, he gets PTSD and goes crazy with all the horrors that he saw inflicted on people and on the Earth by the ruling classes of the colonies. So don't you fucking start with me, son. Do not make Uncle Micah get his belt out, okay? Okay. Anyway, I think it probably goes without saying that this was done by the guy who created Gundam, so it's going to hit the mark. Storyline-wise, I feel like I've said more than enough, and I will say a little bit more when we talk about characterization and spoilers later on. What really gets me with this show is how it brings it with the mobile suit design. Though I did say that I think Gundam Wing might have the best mobile suit design in all of the Gundam shows, the one show that honestly gives me pause when I say that is Zeta Gundam. So if Gundam Wing is number one in my personal book, so don't freak out, Zeta is 1B, and even then, Zeta Gundam honestly walked so that Wing could run from a design standpoint, if I'm being honest. You wouldn't have the Wing Gundam or Wing Zero without the Zeta Gundam, essentially being their older brother. Anyway, the mobile suit designers on this series are pretty goddamn great. You have Kunio Okawara returning, who created the original Gundam and worked on the original series. But he worked closely with Mamoru Nagao, who Tomino worked with on Heavy Metal L-Gaim, and yes, I will review that at some point, and Kazumi Fujita, who primarily designed the titular Zeta Gundam, plus Makoto Kobayashi, who designed the O, and his pride and joy, the Bound Dock. Seriously, if you're on X and you've put together and painted a Bound Dock high-grade kit, at him on X. Trust me, he will probably retweet you. That dude fucking loves his Bound Dock, and for good reason. It's probably my favorite Titans mobile suit. I know this thing would be a big, expensive master grade if they ever went 1/100 with it, but I don't fucking care. I love this thing. I mean, I'm such a fan of this show that I honestly think I own most of the master grades that have come out for it outside of the P Bandai stuff. I mean, I just love the designs. You've got the Zeta itself, both flavors of the Gundam Mark II, Haman Karn's Cubile, the Hyaku Shiki, which is my second favorite Char mobile suit, Amuro's MS in the series, in the Dija, which is the successor to the Gelgoog, and honestly is not a master grade, but it's a really good looking 1/100 scale suit anyway. The Nemo, and then the mobile suits I don't have, kits for like the Hyzak, the Rick Diaz, and the O. Point is that the mobile suit design in this show is fucking incredible. The one thing I especially enjoy about those designs is the reflection of Anaheim Electronics providing weaponry to both sides of the war. Well, 3 sides to the war if you count Axis Zeon when they show up later. For those who don't know about Anaheim Electronics, I recommend watching my Zeta Gundam Explained series. I go over it there, so start at part 1. Regardless, some of the hero units, quote-unquote, like the Gundam Mark II, the Hyaku Shiki, which is kind of a Gundam, or at least a cousin to the Gundam series of mobile suits. It was originally supposed to be a Gundam called the Delta Gundam. It got changed. It looks like a Gundam, so yeah. And the Zeta Gundam obviously had the traditional hero look that the original Gundam had, with the eyes, the anthropomorphic features, and so on and so forth. But there's also suits for the Titans and even Zeon that integrate that same eye design. Yeah, some don't know this, but Haman Karn's Cubile has 2 eyes, not 1. On the flip side, the Zeonic-style mono eye can be found on both sides as well. For example, the Titans use the Hyzak, the Marasai, the Boundock, and this mobile suit I can't pronounce for shit, so I'm going to call it the Herbal Burble. Then the Ayug/Karaba use the Rick Diaz and the Dija, and the Axis Zeon uses the Gaza. So at this point, you get the sense that mobile suit design is becoming more homogenous in many ways. It helps to aid the story, and to be honest, I feel like the best mobile suit design is able to do so in subtle and fun ways. Whenever it comes to a real robot show like Gundam or Vodums or something like that, the meat of the show is always the plot and the characters. The bun that holds the sandwich together is the robot designs. If the robots don't look cool, more than likely nobody's going to care about the story, which is why G-Quax's story better be fucking good. Anyway, now the final thing that it takes to get Gundam is to have strong characterization, and I've been hinting about talking about this for a minute, so let's just get to it. The thing about Zeta Gundam is that it's basically a show where you have a bunch of characters from the previous series clash with both a new foe and also follow a new protagonist. Like I mentioned, Amuro Ray and Bright Noah do return alongside Char Aznable under his Quattro Vagina persona, and much to the chagrin of many, Katz Kobayashi, one of the original kids from the original Gundam show, also returns. On top of that, we see cameos from Kai Shiden, Frau Bo, Hayato Kobayashi, Mirai Yashima, and Mineva Zabi was a baby in the original Gundam, so we'll count her too. Now granted, the main cast we follow is a little smaller than that. Amuro's really in this show for a small portion of it and isn't present for the final conflict of the Grips War. I'm of the opinion that if he had been there with that Dija of his, the final battle probably would have gone very differently. But that's neither here nor there. The cast we mostly follow is on the Argama, a battleship under the Ayug with our main protagonist being Camille Bidan. Now the interesting thing about Camille as a character is that the guy's kind of a filter character. At the outset of the show, he's a fucking brat. Granted, as things play out, you start to understand why he is the way he is. As the show goes on and the war gets worse, a lot of the audience's reactions to the horrors of war tend to be the same reactions that Camille is having. I won't go into spoilers here, but Camille is actually a really good vehicle for the audience. Like us, he holds Bright Noah in high regard and is super stoked when Bright takes over as captain of the Argama. Like the audience, the kid loves mobile suits. He's a huge mobile suit nerd, like most people who probably watch the show, and he adores mobile suit designs. He thinks they're awesome. In universe, he's the one who figured out how to make the transformation of the Zeta Gundam work. Like most 14-year-olds, he also forms a crush on any girl that'll give him the time of day. But as it goes along, we feel the pain that he feels when someone he cares about dies, which happens quite a bit. Granted, the writer's nickname of this show is Kill 'Em All Tomino, so what the fuck else are you expecting? Point being, though Camille's attitude is that of a petulant child at first, as this goes on, he honestly develops into one of the best Gundam protagonists of all time. Not as good as Judo Ashta, but nobody is. Now I also need to talk about Char Aznable, aka Quattro Vagina here. If there's one thing I like about this particular show is how we get to see Quattro develop as a character in this. The thing about him is that during the 1 Year War, we saw a guy who, as far as villains go, wasn't really that evil, but he definitely had character flaws. He just honestly was in a military with people that were way more evil than him. But he was willing to do dirty tactics to get one up on his enemies. He admittedly would use any tool at his disposal to possibly get the W. One of those people being a tool being a woman that was looking after fucking orphans And of course, he even used his own girlfriend. And all in all, was honestly a man of half measures. He wanted the zombies dead, but he went along with some of Zeon's most messed up measures without making a peep about it, including taking orders directly from the zombies. He wanted Lala to be his right hand as he created a place for new types in the universe, but he also put her in harm's way to try to beat the white base, so on and so forth. Now, in the prequel manga to Zeta Gundam, Char's Deleted Affair, we do see a bit of this. But that's something you can see when you watch my Grips War Part 1 video, hint hint. In this show, I won't be too spoilerish, but the struggle we see with Char as he takes on the Quattro persona is that he wants to do good, and he does do good in this. In fact, the actions he takes during the Grips conflict give rise to positive changes for the Federation and for the galaxy as a whole. At the same time, the issue he runs into is that he's not really willing to commit to the bit, as you'd say. As a soldier, he's still far too cold-blooded. He honestly enjoys this a little bit too much, and he's far too willing to compromise in pursuit of the almighty W. He also doesn't seem to really take time to work on his communication with others, or his ability to really identify with other people, which leads to someone on his team becoming a Benedict Arnold, and it's honestly, a good chunk of that is his fault. He never really realizes that he's still taking half measures. He's not going in all the way he needs to. He's willing to do the macro stuff, like wage a war, win key battles, and things along those lines, which are good things to do, don't get me wrong, but he won't fix the micro. He won't fix the guy that fought in the 1-year war and is fighting in this war and is still a very damaged person, going back all the way to the assassination of his father. He will not go to war with the dark side of his own nature, and it's eating him up inside. These elements of the characters, the mechs, the setting, and all of that, being so fucking good is admittedly why you see Gundam fans out there, like me, with very, very high expectations for Gundam series as they come out. And why wouldn't we? Because I'm fat, I'm going to use another food comparison that I do seemingly all the time. So imagine that you've got some cash and you're going to go to one of Gordon Ramsay's restaurants. You expect a Gordon Ramsay quality dish, right? If not, you're an idiot sandwich. Well, if you went to Gordon Ramsay's restaurant and he served you a Big Mac from McDonald's with cold French fries and a Coca-Cola where the ice is already melted into it, you would be fucking pissed. And by the way, when I say Big Mac, keep in mind I live in America. Not Japan, not Australia, not any of the places that have good McDonald's. I'm talking about an American Big Mac, where you doubt that that meat is actually beef and they don't season the fucking patties. You'd be pissed. We'd all be pissed if we were in that scenario, served that crap. But that's what it feels like whenever we get subpar Gundam to an old school fan like us. Zeta Gundam is a dry-aged ribeye steak au poivre served with a side of mashed potatoes, gravy, carrots, and a glass of my favorite bourbon, Knob Creek. These other shows that fall short of the creative expectations are like that shitty American Big Mac with the cold fries and the fucked up soda. Speaking of disappointment, we do need to criticize Tomino for something in this final section.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme, every stanza kind of rhymes with the last one. Hopefully it'll work.
We have to talk about the Zeta movie trilogy known as New Translation. I need to warn you guys right now that there are spoilers ahead here. I think I've done a pretty good job of not really spoiling specific details up to this point, so just keep in mind, as long as those act guys are in the corner, spoilers are inbound. So to put it simply, I fucking hate the Zeta movies. Now don't get me wrong, the scenes that have new animation in them are downright gorgeous. The problem that I have with these films is that they cut out key scenes, and the ending, which is a brand new ending, is just fucking horrible. There are two particularly egregious examples. The first is they completely cut out Char Aznabul's speech in Qatar. This is, quite frankly, the single most important moment in the life of Char Aznabul, and it shows him having a positive effect on the universe. It's a great scene, and Tomino cut it out for reasons. What's worse is that Tomino also changes the ending of Zeta Gundam in this as well, to try and have some lovey-dovey shit. Here's the thing. Zeta Gundam already had a perfect ending. Zeta as a series, like I mentioned earlier, is about a child's encounter with war. All he sees up to this point is death, death, and more death. By the time of Zeta Gundam, Camille has seen lovers and friends die, some of which, like sadly Lieutenant Emma, die right in his goddamn arms. The last thing he really has to stop all of this is to kill the big bad of the final part of the show, who is the Jonathan McIntosh stand-in known as Paptimus Shirako. Camille, via the power of new type magic, harnesses the souls of his dead friends and powers up the Zeta Gundam in an iconic attack known as the Wave Rider Charge. He impales the ever-loving fuck out of Shirako, but before the male feminist can die and burn in hell, he hits Camille with a psychic wave that puts Camille out of commission for a good long while. This, to be honest, is a perfect ending, because it feels like the end of a war. Was there a winner? Yeah, there was. Does anyone feel like a winner? Fuck no, because war sucks. That is a great ending. Plus, it leads to Double Zeta, where Best Boy Judo Ashita saves the universe from Big Booty Haman Karn and that little shithead Glenny Toto. The problem with new translation comes from a phenomenon that I call George Lucasing. This is something that I find in some creatives where they want to make the same mistake that George Lucas did with the special edition of the Star Wars films. Though admittedly, I've had a soft spot for the special editions because it led to my dad and I getting to see Star Wars in theaters together, which was a great moment for a kid. At the same time, a lot of the changes were egregious, and the new CG clashed with older footage. New translation is basically that for Zeta Gundam. The new animation, while beautiful, clashes hard with the footage from the 80s. The changes to the story are absolutely fucking pointless, and the ending fucking sucks! It takes a bittersweet story and tries to turn it saccharine. I get that Tomino is getting older, and when you get older, you get more sentimental. I mean, just look at this old guy's smile. It's great! The thing is, you don't need to change what already hit well by adding things that aren't needed or cutting things that honestly were a key to what you already had. Trying to have the ending of it be love is the pulse of the stars, and you try to have a happy ending after everybody just fucking died, it just feels weird. It just feels wrong. Thing is, you don't need to change what already hit well by adding things that aren't needed or cutting things that were a key to what you already had. Sometimes it's good to just let things stand on their own, making a new translation being one we just didn't need. Well guys, with all that said, I think it goes without saying that Zeta Gundam is a classic, though the films aren't. Though I've said that Gundam Wing is my favorite Gundam show ever, Zeta Gundam is the better of the two shows and is the greatest Gundam show of all time. It is a much denser viewing experience though, so it's not as easy to rewatch as something like Wing or something along those lines, which while it does have some interesting philosophical bits, is a bit lighter in regards to the viewing experience. So if you're looking for a classic that maybe you haven't seen yet in the world of anime and the world of mecha, please, I am begging you, watch Zeta Gundam if you have not already. It is a tremendous series, and you will definitely enjoy it. Also, to do the quick YouTube thing, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, etc. My name is Big Micah C, your favorite vanilla gorilla. I will see you guys next time.